We don't care about British culture. We are as quickly as possible deconstructing it. And we've had this intellectual, social, cultural deconstruction, and we are heading for crisis. We are heading for the brick wall. Well, you could say the plane's crashed into the mountain anyway.
Oh,
and
yes, I think we're there.
the Labour government is accelerating that process in a far greater way than even I thought they would do.
Labour Party conference today, and what I want to do is something that the mainstream media won't. I want to decode the two keynote speeches given by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I've got the perfect person to do it, Philip Kiszely from the New Culture Forum. And listen to this. I think what's really important is also what wasn't said. So in Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer's keynote addresses today to the Labour Party conference, there was not one reference to the threat, the imminent threat facing this country of extreme Islam, both in terms of terror and culture. But what they were happy to talk a lot about were those terrible so-called far-right rioters after the Southport Massacre. So we're going to decode this with Philip Kiszely, but let's look first at Yvette Cooper.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
But Philip Kiszely isn't exactly what she's doing there, trying to conflate the people who had genuine concerns after Southport with that tiny group of people who were violent, which is, by the way, the exact opposite thing that the Labour Party always tells us not to do after an Islamist terror attack, where we're not meant to make any wider judgments about Muslim people.
These people turn context on and off at will. Okay. And I was just looking at that footage and I was quite frightened. This was Mummy Knows Best on steroids. It was a performance, and you could tell that she didn't mean a word of it. Okay. It was just there. It was shouting for the sake of shouting. It was throwing red meat to an audience that desperately wanted to hear it. She is talking about a group of people, and as you say, she is conflating a group of people with a tiny minority of thugs. And I'm not condoning violence, and I'm certainly not condoning setting fire to things or anything like that. But what I'm talking about, okay, and what she's talking about, is a group of people who have constantly been lied to for decade upon decade, a group of people who do not have a voice, a group of people who are now second-class citizens, not only with policing, but two-tier everything, with education, with social cultural services, with just being in and around the city and the town centres. They are second-class citizens now. Let's not forget, also, I don't know whether viewers have seen this, but there was a TED talk today from a woman in Nottingham. I don't know whether you've seen this, Dan.
No, I haven't.
But she was talking about education, and she was talking about ethnically cleansing the curriculum of white males. Okay, so this is a similar kind of thing. On the one hand, Yvette Cooper can talk about the deplorable white people, but she will not mention the other side of the coin, which is overt racism, which is happening in terms of violence, but also cultural violence, cultural racism, which is expunging a certain kind of person from public and actually private life.
No, indeed. There was more from Yvette Cooper, though, that I want you to decode. Let's have a look.
I'll be honest, I've been shocked by the response from some of those in political parties on the right who once claimed to care about law and order. After rioters attacked the police, they should have given full-throated backing to our brave officers. Instead, too often we've seen them undermine the integrity and authority of the police, even making excuses for the mob. If you remember back in the run-up to Armistice Day last year, disgraceful slurs that were made against the police, which made it harder for them to do their job that day, were treated as a sacking offence for a Tory Home Secretary. A year on, those same slurs have become an article of faith for every Tory leadership contender. It is shameful what that party has become. The Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers, undermining respect for the rule of law, trying to fracture the very bonds that keep communities safe.
Okay, Philip, a lot to go at there. What does she mean?
I'm speechless.
Me too, and that never happens.
Can we just think about what she said there, and again how she said it? It was so performative. You know, she's speaking to a bunch of people who desperately want to hear exactly what she's saying. But actually, what she's talking about there, Dan, she is describing precisely what's been happening in the institutions, what's been happening in government, what's been happening to the judiciary, what's been happening in the police service, and it is her kind of people. It is the identitarians, it is the Labour supporters and the Labour MPs who have been wrecking communities. How have they been wrecking communities? It all comes back down to mass immigration, doesn't it? They've opened the floodgates and they've allowed anybody to come in, and when communities that aren't actually that robust because they're poor, when they have to deal with this kind of stuff, that's when things break down. Okay, and it is her ethos, it is the ethos of the government. They are doing what they're accusing other people of doing. It's this same narcissistic gaslighting thing. My concern is that this is going to go into overdrive even more than it is now. What did we have? 1.2 million gross last year. Okay, we're going to have much more this year. Okay, and we're going to be even more unable to complain about it because censorship and authoritarian rule of law is they're just going to be imposing those things on people like you and me, on the ordinary people, especially in the streets who just want change. It's going to be a very, very difficult time. And I worry so much about what's going to happen to this country over the next 2 or 3 years. And what makes me worry, it's not people without a voice and people who are marching in the streets. Okay, fair enough. It's people like her telling blatant lies, because there comes a point for ordinary people when they will just not accept anymore these Orwellian blatant lies.
I know we thought things were bad under the Conservatives, but this is on a whole other level now. So following Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, was the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, Scrounger Starmer, however you want to call him these days. Let's watch.
To say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different. I say, not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win, because the British values we stand for, not just the rule of law, but a love for this country and our neighbours, the respect for difference under the same flag that is stronger than bricks, and you know it. It's what you cannot stand about our country, our reasonable, tolerant country, but it's absolutely who we are.
And what's he talking about there, Philip Kiszely? Because, I'm sorry, none of the issues that have been raised by the vast bulk of people following the Southport Massacre or before have anything to do with the colour of anyone's skin. It's actually been about the changes to the country, the complete lack of infrastructure for this huge invasion, and critically, the values that some of these people have coming into the country where they quite clearly hate what it means to be English, what it means to live here, what it means to be part of a liberal, tolerant society. And yes, I do include extreme Islam in that, by the way, that wants to throw someone like me as a gay man off the top of a building. And that is no exaggeration, because that is what is taught in a lot of the mosques in East London. Now, I'm sorry, I don't believe that does make me someone who's going against the fabric of what it means to be English. It's the best time of year. Football is back, so we're talking Premier League in the UK, in the US, NFL Sundays, and college football Saturdays. With that, of course, comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups. This is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your telly, and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy that gets ridiculed in the group chat. So listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench, because let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine. And that's why I want to tell you today about Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue era nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster. With precise trimming capabilities, it's reliant, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants a surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day, so the Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials, because today it comes with 2 completely free gifts. This is so cool. The Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. I'm one of them. And get ready for kickoff by heading over to www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken for 20% off, and totally free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So 20% off, free shipping. You just have to use the code Outspoken at checkout at www.manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way.
No, it's really interesting listening to him talk there, and I've listened to that a few times. There's been a violence done to the culture over the last few years. And there's a sense that now we're in a period where people, in a way, just don't take anything these people say seriously, because, as I said before, it's lies that are coming out of their mouths. So on the one hand, okay, we have Islamist extremism. We have young men from very hostile cultures coming into this country, and we are not allowed to critique any of it. Okay, we're not even allowed to acknowledge it's happening. We can't even look at stats, for example, that tell us that there are sexual assaults going on in London, particularly on the public transport system. We don't know who's doing them. We know they're men, and we know that there are plenty of them going on. They've gone through the roof since 2020, but we don't have any more detail than that. They will not give us a demographic breakdown, and we know why that's the case. Okay, so we are not allowed to talk about or criticize any other culture. In fact, we have to celebrate every other culture. That's all we do. We celebrate every other culture. We celebrate diversity. We celebrate inclusion, apart from the inclusion of the British culture. All we do is deconstruct the British culture. Children are brainwashed into thinking that their history is terrible, that they are terrible because of the color of their white skin, that they need to repent somehow and make reparations. And we're talking primarily here about poor people. Poor people somehow need to make reparations. So that's where we are at the moment. And all the Prime Minister, my God, he's the Prime Minister, all the Prime Minister is doing there is saying, look, you're rubbish. We're not listening to you. We don't care about what you think. We don't care about any of your concerns. We don't care about British culture. We are as quickly as possible deconstructing it. And we've had this intellectual, social, cultural deconstruction, and we are heading for crisis. We are heading for the brick wall. Well, you could say the planes crashed into the mountain anyway.
Oh,
and
yes, I think we're there.
the Labour government is accelerating that process in a far greater way than even I thought they would do.
Totally. And they hid it from us too. He wasn't done there. Philip, more from Starmer.
But conference, whatever anyone thinks about immigration, I will never accept the argument made not just by the usual suspects, but by people who should have known better, who said that millions of people concerned about immigration are one and the same thing as the people who smashed up businesses, who targeted mosques, attempted to burn refugees, scrawled racist graffiti over walls, Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, attacked NHS nurses, and told people with different coloured skin, people who contribute here, people who grew up here, that they should go home. No.
But Philip Kiszely, what he is doing there, yet again, is directly linking the issue of immigration to the so-called riots. He is the one that is refusing to separate the two things. And he is the one that's making anyone who feels like they do have concerns about mass immigration, like he's calling them some sort of racist.
Yeah, it's textbook manipulation, and it's quite worrying to look at it as we're looking at the clips bit by bit. I find myself very alarmed, and I find myself alarmed at the performativity of it all as well. He needs someone to train him properly to kind of put these points across. But it makes me think. He's talking about Nazi salutes at the cenotaph. Okay. One thing he's not talking about, and you probably know what I'm going to say here, are the Saturday hate marches every week, where we're seeing
not even
the most appalling anti-Semitism from, it has to be said, from Islamic communities, from Islamist extremists in particular, but also from the Corbynist left of his party, and we are seeing anti-Semitism from his own MPs. So there is a sense that if you're going to say there is a problem about racism in this country, right, there's a very clear and obvious problem, and that's anti-Semitism, because it's riddled through the institutions.
Right.
Okay, the intelligentsia, who we started this conversation talking about, the intelligentsia have changed anti-Semitism to anti-Zionism. And they have built so many concepts and theories around it, and they've made it kind of almost respectable among that group of people. So that's what we've really got to worry about, because there's real power behind it. What do we have? That's never going to be addressed. That's never going to be addressed, because there's no reason for him to address it. The more that carries on, the more powerful the Labour Party and he will be. And he's in this terrible situation now where he has to pay lip service to it. Because if he doesn't, the extremists will leave his party and join the Gaza alliance. Okay, so if we are talking about racism, and we do want to be really, really honest about this, then yes, we've got to talk about Corbyn and his mates, and we've got to think about, why is there a Gaza alliance, for God's sake, in British Parliament? And the reason is because they are all massively anti-Semitic, they hate the West, and they hate Britain.
Very good point. Very, very important point. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.